Okay, granulocytes versus agranulocytes. So we're going to continue with leukocytes now. You should remember the discussion that we had on the granulocytic leukocytes, right? Our phils, our neutrophils, our eosinophils, our basophils. Now we move onwards to the agranulocytes. So again, a slightly different um, developmental pathway. So the very, very distinctive lymphocytes, and then our monocytes, which do come from what we call these myeloid stem cell branch. So kind of related, but developed in a different strategy as the granulocytic cells. So let's look at our agranulocytes. So these are white blood cells that lack visible cytoplasmic granules. So the granulocytes, the phils, will have these little like dots, little chocolate chip looking things. The agranulocytes lack those. They don't have any little granules scattered in the cell. So we have the tiniest of the cell, the lymphocytes, and then the monocytes, one of the bigger of the cells here, right? So lymphocytes, the smallest of the white blood cells. They're kind of funny, actually. They have very large nuclei, very large, just regular round nucleus, spherical nucleus, but very little cytoplasm. So they're basically a cell that's just basically nucleus, right? Not a whole lot of other cytoplasm around that cell. So if this was like a human, is basically a big brain, and basically that's all. Just a lot of genetic information, a big nucleus like a brain, and not much else. So these are what we're going to consider are the thinkers. They don't do much else but think and contemplate and strategize, and they're going to be a very effective part of our immune system. So lymphocytes are going to migrate to lymphatic organs. We're going to talk about those a little bit later. So we associate lymphatic organs like the lymph nodes, spleen, and tonsils with the lymphocytes. So sites, cells of the lymphatic system. So lymph nodes, spleen, tonsils, that's where these lymphocytes tend to hang out and proliferate and reproduce. So there's going to be two types of lymphocytes that we're kind of previewing what we're going to get into later in the immunology chapter. But we're going to have the B lymphocytes, which are the B cells, and the T lymphocytes, which are the T cells. So B cells will help to produce antibodies. T cells are going to help destroy viral infected cells and cancer cells. So if we analyze what's going on here, right, we have like a particular leukocyte for different types of invaders. If bacteria comes into the body, we have neutrophils that fight them off. If parasitic worms come into the body, we have eosinophils that do the job, right? Well, what if we have a virus coming in? A virus is a non-living entity, right? So it doesn't look like a bacteria, doesn't look like a worm. Well, we have these intelligent, these thinking types of lymphocyte cells that have to distinguish this non-living particle that infects our living cell. So it's basically our cell following the viral instructions, acting weird, causing chaos. So our lymphocyte has to be able to distinguish, hey, that cell belongs to me, but it's acting strange, right? So I'm going to go in there and try to destroy it. If we have cancer, cancer is, again, our cell, right? It's not an infected cell with a bacteria or fungus. It's our cell that's just acting weird. So these smart lymphocytes have to be able to detect, yes, it's my cell, but it's not doing what it's supposed to. It's not acting right. So this has to be addressed and taken care of right now. So again, the thinking cells, very, very different lineage of white blood cells there. So the monocytes are the big cells, largest of the white blood cells, and they have this big U or C-shaped, Pac-Man shape type of nucleus there. Big cells, and we have kind of the extreme. We have the smallest cell, the lymphocytes, and then the biggest cell, the monocytes. So monocytes are going to be really good at phagocytizing, again, bacteria and other cell debris. What monocytes are really good for is what we call chronic infections. So first responders, the neutrophils arrive. Remember, neutrophils, they arrive. They try to get the bacteria, but if the bacteria is too abundant or very resistant and the neutrophils are having a hard time, we'll enter second line of defense, which are the monocytes, a bigger, beefier type of cell to try to fight off this long chronic infection there. Now, if there's a third option, right? So we have neutrophils against bacteria. If that doesn't work, then we have monocytes. And if that doesn't work, monocytes can then go and sort of like work out, get stronger, take some steroids or something and get even bigger and form into what we call macrophages. So again, these monocytes remain in circulation for 2 to 3 days and travel to tissues and transform into macrophages. So they become even a greater defensive type of cell. So they help to mount a complete immune response, and they're just a big cell. So let me come back over here. So our agranulocytic lineage. So there's our very different, very smart, basically all brain, basically nothing but a nucleus. There's our lymphocyte. The monocyte, big cell, big Pac-Man shaped nucleus. But if we have to go to even a third line defense, it can transform into this macrophage there. So that's where this is in the tissues. So monocyte would be in circulation. Macrophage would be actually in the tissues themselves. All right, and so that I hope that gives you a good introduction onto the different types of white blood cells. What we're going to do now is look at some of the disorders that can happen, right? And we talk about this kind of collectively because there's different categories of leukocytes. So right now I'm just kind of just generic umbrella idea of these disorders. So one, penia, leukopenia. Leukopenia is basically an abnormally low white blood count. So there's not enough white blood cells. It could be whatever category of those, but there's a deficiency of white blood cell count. And depending on which one is deficient, it's going to have an impact on, you know, whatever that particular white blood cell is designed to do. But this can be due to certain drugs that affect the bone marrow, that affect that trajectory of development. A lot of this chemotherapeutic drugs can do this as well. So in leukopenia, a lack of white blood cells. Now, leukemia sounds a little bit similar, right? Leukemia is basically a group of cancerous conditions. So if leukopenia is a deficiency, not enough, leukemia would be an excess, too many, right? Too many of these cells that are being produced, but they're not correct. They're in abundance, but they're abnormally shaped. They're not doing their job the way they're supposed to. And again, a lot of different potential categories. I would say over like 60 or more different types of leukemias. They're going to be named based on the whether the acute right away or chronic, and they're going to be named based on the type of white cell that is infected. So again, myelocytic leukemia, monocytic leukemia, lymphocytic leukemia. So depending on which of these particular cells, right? So maybe this cell becomes cancerous. 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 So whichever one of these particular cells becomes cancerous and at different stages, it's going to have different effects. So let's say that this cell right here becomes cancerous. Well, we know that it's going to affect only the production of lymphocytes, which is a bad effect, right? But well, what if it's let's say right here, what if it's the myeloid stem cell that becomes cancerous? This is more harmful because it will affect every one of these aspects, and none of these would then be produced correctly. If the hemocytoblast becomes cancerous, all white cells and the red blood cells become damaged as well, or not produced, right? So again, can be very complex as to which leukemia, which actual cell in the developmental pathway is being affected there. Again, can cause fever, weight loss, bone pain, can be linked back to anemia. So this is a red blood cell issue, and bleeding problems, which is going to be a platelet issue as well. So lots of different stuff going on there. So let me stop this one here, and then I'll cover the last little bit on our platelets, our clotting factors, and kind of keep it in different individual blocks here.